and start. This is Tuesday, May 25th. There are 57 days until San Diego Comic-Con 2021. Welcome to SDConCast, the official podcast of the San Diego Comic-Con unofficial blog.
VANUHTEE go.
Oh my God, I love LiveJournal, and my LiveJournal loves me. Current mood is hyperactive, current music, refuse 73. I love the color scheme, it's pink and purple.
Well, good evening, everybody. I'm your host, James Riley, and joining me on the podcast, as always, Carrie Dixon.
Hey, guys. Thanks so much for joining us.
And also joining us, Erin Tapkin.
Hi, everybody.
And our special guest for the fourth year in a row, Mark Evanier.
Hello.
All right. So this is the 10th season of SDConCast, and just like last year, we'll be doing them monthly as we're going virtual again for Comic-Con. During the show, we'll be taking your comments and questions. You can tweet us at SD_comic_con or use the hashtag SDConCast. We will also be keeping an eye on the YouTube live chat if you wish to comment there. First up, Carrie, why don't you get us started? Let's talk to Mark.
Hey, Mark. Thank you so much for coming back to join us for a fourth time, which feels crazy. But for anyone tuning in who doesn't know you, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I have been at every single multi-day convention that the Comic-Con ever had since I got out of high school, which was a long time ago. I was at the very first one in 1970, and I do a lot of panels there, and I don't know. That's what I do. I love the Comic-Con. I love being a part of it. It is a great part of my year, which I have missed a lot. And when I'm not doing that, I write comic books, I write TV shows, I write cartoon shows. I do all these things just so I am qualified to be a guest at Comic-Con. There's no other reason really to do them because none of them pay me anything. And, I have actually, here I'll brag one thing. I have never paid to go to Comic-Con. I have been a guest ever since the first one. It's.
I think that's a pretty high achievement.
Well, or cheap being cheap. But I've watched this thing grow from 300 people in the entire convention to 300 people ahead of you in the line for the men's room. And I will tell you, though, interestingly, obviously last year we did not go to Comic-Con, any of us. This year we did not go to WonderCon, but I have already gone to this year's Comic-Con. I have attended this Comic-Con that would have been in July this year because my partner Sergio Aragones and I have a comic book coming out in July called Gru Meets Tarzan, which is set in an alternate universe where the 2021 Comic-Con actually happened. And if you want to see what happens at the 2021 Comic-Con, pick up the Gru Meets Tarzan comic book coming out in July.
I think that's lovely. I think that's an adorable idea. So have you been staying busy here for the last year in this crazy year that we've had?
Well, we've all gone through changes. My life has changed from sitting in front of my computer all day writing to sitting in front of my computer all day writing. And that's it. I mean, it's what the pandemic has done has turned us all into freelancers who work at home. And I've been a freelancer who worked at home for most of my life. So it's not all that different. I don't go out much. Yes, I've been vaccinated. Yes, I have masks at I've got one right within arm's reach here. I have managed to avoid, I'll tell you, back when we didn't know what this was going to be, what this pandemic was going to be, I was in my doctor's office one day, and my doctor had said, there's this growing medical problem, he told me a little bit about it. he didn't even understand the full weight of it. But he said, I think you should just stay home for the next, until it's over with. He had no idea how long it would last. And he told me to avoid public places. He said all the obvious things. And I said, well, I have really nothing planned except in about 3 or 4 weeks, I'm going to this thing down in Anaheim called WonderCon. And he said, no, you're not. You're not going to go to it. And I said, well, I kind of promised I'd be there and host some panels. He said, it's not going to happen. And if it does happen, it shouldn't happen. And you should talk the convention into not having itself. You should call, if you have any clout there, call these people and tell them they're going to have to cancel this thing, and they might as well cancel it now. And I said, well, I don't think I have that much clout. And just then, I swear to you, my cell phone buzzed, my pocket. I looked at it, and there was a text message from one of the convention people saying, we're canceling the WonderCon. I said, mission accomplished. So I've stayed home writing things. I did a bunch of panels for WonderCon on video. I did a bunch for San Diego. I did a bunch for WonderCon this year. I'm about to do a couple for Comic-Con this year. And that's what I'm doing. And I also experimented for a time with webcasting myself just for fun. I did a bunch of panels with friends of mine, and I came to appreciate what you do all the more. I decided I wasn't cut out for doing that. So I'm going to leave the webcasting to the experienced people like yourselves for the time being.
So doing virtual conventions and virtual panels, how much is that? Is that more work than having to do them in person, or is it less work? Do you feel more pressure?
Well, you feel a little more pressure because people are going to be watching them forever. If I do a lousy panel at San Diego Live, it's over and it's forgotten. So you feel a little, and also you feel a little encouragement to make it extra special because of the situation you have in there, but still amounts to getting a bunch of people to say yes. And one of the advantages of it, I can get some people occasionally who aren't going to be at Comic-Con. I did a Jack Kirby panel for WonderCon this year, where I got 3 people we had 3 people, myself and 2 others in 3 different countries in 3 different time zones on 2 different days. I had Jonathan Ross in England, and he was like at 8 o'clock in the evening when we recorded this. And we had Neil Gaiman in New Zealand, and he was at 9 o'clock the next morning in New Zealand. And we talked about 3 of us talked about Jack Kirby for an hour. You can't really do that live. So that was fun and interesting. I've got another panel I'm trying to put together right now for this year that will do the same kind of roping in someone who is not going to be physically at Comic-Con. But, you know, it's still a matter of just the fun of sitting around talking to people, which, as you know, is a great thing. And I have come to appreciate Zoom and StreamYard and all the different Skype things that people use to communicate a lot. I spent a lot of my day on Zoom meetings and little conferences and seeing people. And it's not uncommon for me to be talking to a friend on the audio only phone, and suddenly one of us says, "Hey, let's get on Zoom," and so we can look at each other as we say these things. And I think it's become a very great part of our lives that is not going to go away when the pandemic is history.
Yeah, it does seem like a lot of things that have happened over the last year are going to basically become part of life.
Yeah, well, you know, I've gotten to be very used to Instacart and Grubhub and DoorDash bringing me food cooked and uncooked.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to stop. I think I'm still going to use that to a certain extent, maybe not quite as much, but and I've gotten used to. I did some remodeling to my home to make it more comfortable to be in it long term, and that's not a bad thing. I enhanced my video. I actually have worked through my pile of DVDs I'd never watched. I'm working through it. I had ridiculous number piled up. So the pile was so long that it was all DVDs. I hadn't even gotten to the Blu-ray pile yet. And I have a few friends who are safe to have come over and visit and stay here occasionally and things like that. It's fine. I miss the convention. I miss the crowds. I miss the excitement. I miss the running into people, you know, randomly, which you don't do it online very much. I miss, you know, I miss being in that environment where the whole world is comic books or related media for a while. I miss the pace of it. One of the great things for me about Comic-Con is that I go there with a schedule of my time. Every hour is accounted for in advance. I know when I'm going to eat, when I'm going to be interviewed, when I'm going to interview someone. I've got a panel, I've got a business meeting, whatever, and it's just running from one thing to another. I couldn't live that way much of the year, but it's fun to do it for 4 or 5 days at a time. And every second is interesting. And if you find yourself at Comic-Con, if you find yourself with nothing to do for a moment, you just turn around and there's someone you want to meet, or there's something you want to look at, or there's something you want to do. I don't know how you can ever get bored there for a second unless your tastes are really, really narrow.
Yeah, I think if you're there and you're bored, that says a lot about the kind of person that you are. I
don't know if I told this story in one of my 105 appearances here before, but my friend Carolyn brought some friends of hers to Comic-Con one year who were not into comics or science fiction or animation or video games or cosplay, any of that stuff. And they had a great time. And the reason they had a great time is they felt it was exciting to be around so many people who had made something. Everywhere you look, someone did a painting, someone made a sculpture, someone made a costume, someone made a statue, whatever it was. You were just surrounded by creative people. And that's very exciting, whether you're a creative person yourself or not. It makes people who aren't creative people want to go out and write or draw something. It makes people who are creative inspired to go and do something new. And I think that's one of the exciting things about Comic-Con. And everybody goes for something different. I am not into the commerce that much. I am not going around buying old comics for my collection. I have all the ones I ever wanted. I'm not going around buying, new books and things about comics so much because I get a lot of freebies sent to me for connections and things, and I can't even read all those, let alone the ones that I don't get sent for free. I just run into people who are interesting. There's so many fascinating people in that room, and I'm talking just about the people who are guests or being interviewed. I mean, I just will have walked around the convention. I see somebody's badge. I go, oh, I've always wanted to meet that person. There they are. They're here. Not necessarily big celebrities. Maybe people whose names wouldn't mean anything to the viewers here, but somebody I knew who was involved in animation years ago or involved in some very obscure job in comics or such. I can't tell you how much fun it is to wander around. This is why I will not sit behind a table at Comic-Con. I like to circulate and wander around, and I won't sit there and sell stuff. I want to be free to enjoy the convention. I've gone to conventions where the publisher had me sitting there for hours signing things, and those are boring. I want to go around and meet people and talk to them. I'd much rather talk to people than sign their books.
Sounds like it's always a good time no matter what you're doing at Comic-Con. Speaking of your panels that you mentioned a little bit ago, you're going to be hosting 3 of them for Comic-Con at Home. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
Well, they're the same 3 I've done each time. I'm doing a Cartoon Voices panel, I'm doing a Jack Kirby panel, and I'm doing a panel about Sergio and myself, our work together. And I don't know much more about, I haven't firmed up anybody on them yet. I'm going to record them in a week or 2. See who's available. A couple of people have said they'll do them, but I don't like to announce them until I have them recorded. But it's, it's, people keep asking us if we can do the quick draw game online. We haven't figured out a way to do that. We do this thing every year at both conventions, WonderCon and San Diego, with 3 cartoonists, one of whom is Sergio Aragonés, one of whom is Scott Shaw, and a guest cartoonist, drawing stuff. You've all seen this, I assume, anyway. And I couldn't figure out a way to do it online and have it make any sense, especially if you record it in advance. It's one of those things that has to be live, and it has to be with people making suggestions. And I couldn't find a software that would put faces of all 4 of us and the 3 drawing pads on the same time and show the audience. So, I talk about Jack Kirby every day of my life practically with somebody. He was such a major influence on not just me, but everybody who was in comics even if they didn't do exactly his kind of comics. I haven't done that many superheroes in my life, and he still had a very big influence on me, both personally and professionally. And so it's fun to talk about Jack for an hour. It's always fun to talk to Sergio for an hour. It's always fun to talk to cartoon voice actors for an hour. Cartoon voice actors, I have found in my career as a writer, producer, and voice director for cartoons, cartoon voice actors are some of the nicest, funniest people you'll ever meet. They're like actors, but they have decided not to become stars and not to worry that much about their appearances. They're voiceover people for the most part, even though some of them do have on-camera careers. They just love acting and doing voices. They love doing this. And you're doing something you love and making a living at it, you tend to be a very nice person. And there's about 2% of the talent pool of voice actors I think are not very nice people or not very friendly people and such. And when I do my panels, I can just eliminate those 2% and not ask them to be on it. So everyone, how do I do? I get four or five really wonderful people, and we've had, Rob Paulson and Maurice LaMarche and Phil Hartman. We've had Phil Lamar. We had Fred Tatasciore. All these people that I just love hanging around with. So, if people enjoy the panels, great. But I have more fun probably than anybody.
I kind of feel like a panel just with you telling stories would be really entertaining.
Well, too often they all turn into that. But there's a very, I'll tell you, when I started doing panels at the convention, at first I did like one every year. Every year, the early SDCons, they said, we'll have a writer's panel. Mark, do a writer's panel. So I get together a bunch of writers and we talk about writing. And they were not very good panels because we were all writing different stuff. And we somehow, if I talk about my work and this guy talks about his work, and this guy talks about his work, we're talking about three very different topics. And I did not know as a moderator then how to break the boundaries so everybody talked to everybody else about common threads. And then as it went along, what happened was the convention invited an awful lot of people who wrote and drew comics in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Great masters, people who did comics that, we remembered fondly from our childhood. And they would say, someone like Al Williamson, for example, was out one year. And Al was a great comic artist who worked for EC Comics, drew the Flash Gordon comic books, did a couple of newspaper strips, and a lovely man. And he had been told, go to this room at 3 o'clock and do a panel. And he said, I don't know how to do a panel. And he said, Mark, will you interview me? Will you come by and interview me? So I did that. We went there and I got to interview Al Williamson, a man I was interested in. And we had a whole audience. And that's how I started doing panels where I interview other people, basically. People asked to have me do this. And they would go to these professionals. And these are guys who spent their lives hunched over a typewriter, hunched over a drawing table. They weren't necessarily showbiz night. They weren't the kind of people who get up and give a fun lecture and talk and tell funny stories naturally. They were shy people. They were people who did not get into a field to be celebrities and to talk in front of audiences. So the convention would say to these people, we want to fly you out. We want to give you a big, all expenses paid trip to San Diego and honor you and have you meet your fans. And we want you to do a panel. They go, well, I can't talk in front of people. And they'd say, we got this guy named Mark Evanier. Don't worry, he'll put you, and they would sometimes have a former guest who I interviewed call the guest who wouldn't say yes and say, tell him how easy Mark made it. So literally, there's a man named Nick Cardy, and everybody who loves comic books will know that name. He wouldn't come out for years and years, and finally, another artist called him and said, get out there and just ask for Mark Evanier. He will help you. He will help you speak in front of people. So I said, okay. He said, okay. He comes out, and I met him the morning of the panel, and he said, now you're going to have to handle this. I came here. I'm trusting you, Mark. I don't know how to speak in front of people. I don't know how to do this. And he said, could you get some more people to be on the panel? So if I clam up, there's something. So I asked Colleen Duran, who was a friend of his, and Marv Wolfman, who was a friend of his, and Sergio Aragones, who would work with him, to be on the panel also. So if Nick shut up, we had somebody to talk about Nick. The panel started, and I introduced Nick to all these people. And I asked Nick a question. And 20 minutes later, I asked him the second question. And 15 minutes later, I was on a 4-question panel because Nick just got started, and he was funny, and he was charming. And at the end of it, he turned to me and he says, "Oh, I hope it was all right. I don't know what to say. I didn't know." He was perfect. He was ideal. And then I'll tell you another thing, which is what I love about Comic-Con. Nick had worked in isolation all these years. He had worked in his own little studio. He never met his fans very much. And he just really didn't know how much he was appreciated. So they had him down in the exhibit hall, and they had him at a table sitting next to Colleen Durant. And he didn't think anybody would be interested in him. And he gets down to the table, and there's a line, the same kind of line that you'd imagine would be there for, Robert Downey Jr., snaking through the dealer's room of people. And it wasn't just people who wanted to meet him. There were people who wanted to say to him, "Mr. Cardy, I'm a professional artist. I became a professional artist because of you. You inspired me. Your work caused me to start drawing when I was 8 years old. I looked at your work and I tried copying it, studying it, and I said, I want to draw like that." And Nick is the kind of guy he was. We sadly lost him. He was the kind of guy who would cry if you told him the tide was going out. And he spent 4 days at that convention happily crying about all this love he was getting, not just from people who read his comics, but from people who were inspired to become professional artists, and people who considered him a master, and people who wanted to ask him, "How did you do that thing in that issue of Teen Titans and Batlash?" And he just had the greatest time of his life. And I'm thinking to myself, gee, how often do you have the best weekend of your life when you're 82 years old? And then a couple of years ago, we brought out this woman, Joy Murchison Kelly, who had been writing Wonder Woman in the 40s. She was very unknown. She was so unknown that when we announced we were going to give her the Bill Finger Award, which we give for being an overlooked, neglected writer, everybody said, "Who the hell is that?" But she had written Wonder Woman in the 40s, never got her name on her work then, didn't get paid all that well either. And we brought her out, I think she was 94, whatever she was. And here she comes, again, the best weekend of her life. She was amazed by it. She was amazed at all these people lining up to meet her, and women who considered her a role model, because for a woman to make her career as a professional writer in 1943 was not very normal. And she had written comics that inspired them. And she was charming and funny. And she was with her second husband, and he was charming and funny. And you just loved these people. And it was such a great experience. Most of my great memories of Comic-Con are things like that, where we gave an award to someone or brought them out and honored them and realized, I used to think awards were stupid. I was nominated for Emmys and I didn't go to the ceremonies because I didn't want to sit there while I was losing. Or if I won, I didn't want to get up there and pretend like, there's too much explosion of ego if you win an award in front of people. And so I thought they were dumb, but then I realized when you go to the right people at the right time, they are very meaningful and important. And so that's a lot of my favorite memories of Comic-Con are that. And I'll shut up now and you can ask me a question because I don't want to be like Nick Cardy.
No. Honestly, Mark, this is why we invite you back every year. Talk all you want. But I will say, and you talking, it's making me miss Comic-Con so much. And I think we're all very curious to see what happens to conventions moving forward from this crazy year. You've been going forever. How do you envision the future of cons after all of this?
Well, in the next few months, there are a lot of little cons around the country. There have been a few lately. Mm-hmm. And I personally think some of them were premature. I think there's, I'm not one of these people who thinks, throw the mask away, it's all over. Go hug all your friends, even the unvaccinated ones. I think it's important to be cautious. I'm 69 years old, so I'm not a person who ought to get this disease. So we're going to see these conventions. They're going to have a bunch of them before we get to the the rumored, announced, maybe going to happen San Diego one in Thanksgiving, and I'm not going to any of them because, first of all, I really don't want to fly right now. It looks very unfun, and I really don't want to be at a convention worrying about. I don't think I'll be able to get it off my mind. So, but I think what's going to happen. See, we have all these people who want to throw conventions, and you know, you and I talk about Comic-Con and you know, conventions of that size and that expertise. Most Comic-Cons are not run like that. Most Comic-Cons are horror cons. So they're small things. They're underfunded. I can't tell you the number of stories I've heard of people who've gone to, friends of mine who've gone to horror cons and gotten there and discovered that the convention can't cover the hotel and can't cover the return fare, and nobody showed up, so they're not making any money selling their pictures. There's a lot of bad Comic-Cons or conventions around. It's become too easy a market for someone to announce one and put it on, thinking that boards will show up and they'll pay and all the bills will then get covered. But those little conventions around are kind of pioneering what has to be done. Somebody is learning how to space the table. Someone is learning how to, you know, deal with masks for photo ops. There's an autograph, a Hollywood show autograph convention in August here in Burbank, and one of the big features of those is get your picture taken with a celebrity in front of a professional photographer. You can pay, you know, $40 or $60, depends on how big the celebrity is. And you can sit there and the celebrity will pose for you for a picture. And I'm wondering how many celebrities are going to be willing to sit there all day next to people who may or may not be vaccinated, who want to shake hands, and how many people are going to want to do that. If William Shatner is not vaccinated, he could infect an awful lot of people at some of these things. You know, that man is in more pictures than the president's bodyguards. But and we'll learn how that's done. I'm not going to go to the autograph show, but I want to hear about what they did and what they learned how to do it. By the time we get to the probable November Comic-Con special edition, assuming that there's no flare-up of COVID-19, assuming that there's no new disease that comes along to outdo it, assuming that the levels of infection continue to drop as they've been dropping. And I don't think it's fair to assume all this, but even if it looks likely, you should keep in mind that we've had a lot of surprises in the last year or two. The convention people who run San Diego are very wonderful. I've said this every year. I continue to say it. They run them brilliantly. They're smart. They know how to do it. They make it look much easier than it is. If you take nothing away from my little appearances here on your webcast, trust me that Comic-Con is a lot more difficult to put on than people think it is. And if you think it's really, really hard, it's still more difficult than you think it is. And they make it look so easy. I am amazed at how they handle problems, how they deal with them. And you know, I go to them all the time. They say, "Do you have suggestions?" They say, "Yeah, why don't you try this?" "Oh, we're already doing that. Thank you." You know, yes, we already figured that out. Thank you. And they will know what to do. I have, if indeed the first convention I go back to is run by those people, I will have a comfort level because they're running that convention. Right? Did I answer your question?
Yeah, no, I think you did.
Yeah. So, what else?
I had a question that, so obviously with COVID, the real world impacted Comic-Con, pop culture in a significant way, not just for conventions, but, you know, productions on things slowed down. People had to figure out how to work in that. Can you remember, I mean, I don't think anything has affected conventions and pop culture in such a way in the past, but can you remember anything that maybe had like a real world thing that had an impact on our fun in conventions? Like, I think there was like something like in, I think the 90s, the cost of paper skyrocketed and comics just were jumping prices like every other month.
Well, I think there was a couple of comic book conventions or conventions across the country that were canceled after 9/11. I think there have been a couple of things like that.
Right.
I know that, and there's conventions occasionally that have been canceled because of hurricanes and typhoons. I don't remember the cost. I remember the cost of paper bringing up the price of comic books, but I don't remember it curtailing conventions, which often don't have very much to do with current comic books.
Yeah.
Some do and some don't. I think what has affected conventions, has caused conventions to change over the last couple of decades, is mostly the amount of money that celebrities are making at them, which does not really affect Comic-Con. Or, I mean, Comic-Con is different, and I'm talking about WonderCon as well. They are important as promotional vehicles for movies and games, and there are a lot of commerce is done. A lot of companies say we've got to bring out product timed so we can either introduce it at these conventions or promote it, have it far enough along where we can show a preview or give a demonstration. It affects the industry a lot in that way. But again, I can't remember if I've told this story before, but I've had a couple of big celebrities or people representing them come to me and they say, can you get my client into Comic-Con as a guest to sign autographs for money? Because that celebrity has gone to other conventions and come away with $30,000 for a day or $50,000 for a day or a weekend of signing their name. And Comic-Con doesn't do that. It is a huge convention, but it's not a place where you can make a lot of money sitting behind a table signing, because A, they don't pay to bring celebrities in like that. They assume the movie studios will bring them in. And B, when you're at Comic-Con, there's so much to buy, and there are people sitting there signing autographs for free to promote their product. And it's so big they can't find you. I had the wife of a big celebrity call me and say, you know, you should get him into Comic-Con, and she was expecting they would give them first class airfare, give them a suite at one of the hotels, give them an unlimited per diem for food, and give them a guarantee up front of a lot of money. You'll make at least this much signing there. And I said, they're not going to do any of that stuff. They don't bring in celebrities like that. The guests they bring in, the guests that they pay to have there are people like me. They're not huge movie stars or celebrities. And they said, well, why wouldn't they do this? The other conventions did this. And I said, why would they need, your husband as a superstar guest at this convention? And she said, don't you know how many people he'd bring in? And I said, the convention sells out in 40 minutes. If they advertised him, it would sell out maybe in 39. They don't need it. They don't need anybody. This is the thing. The convention is the star itself. People don't go to Comic-Con, they say, because of this one person who's going to be there. They go to Comic-Con because they want to be at Comic-Con, and they know 30 things that are going to or might happen there. I can't tell you before the convention how many calls and emails I get from people who say, is there any way to get into Comic-Con? It's sold out. Can you tell me where to get tickets? You know anybody bootlegs tickets? Can you pull any strings and get me in? They're not there because they want to see someone in particular. They want to be there because they want to be there.
So true.
I love that you mentioned that you're the kind of person that Comic-Con pays to bring in and not the movie star, just because every year there's always so much talk about Comic-Con isn't about the comics anymore. It's one of my pet peeves. It drives me crazy because it just simply isn't true at all.
True. Yeah.
I probably have told this story before, but you get when you ask me on for the 33rd time. I had a guy come up to me one year at Comic-Con. He said, I can't stand this. There's nothing here about comics. It's all about movie stars, and nobody's doing anything about comics. And I said, well, I just did a panel this afternoon. We had the last 3 surviving Bob Kane ghost artists for Batman who worked on Batman in the 40s. And we had Sheldon Moldoff, Dick Sprang, and I can't remember. Phil. I'm sorry, I can't remember the third gentleman's name right this second. And we talked about drawing Batman comics in the 40s and working with Bob Kane as his ghost artist and doing all this work. And you can't get more comic book history than that. There's no panel in the world that's more comic book history than that. And I said, where were you? And he said, oh, I was in line for the Lost panel. So that to me is the answer to that question. It's there. There's lots about comics. Just go to the website, the convention website, and search for my name, and you'll find 10 panels that are about comic books. Or search for the name of any great comic book person who you think is there. Search for the word comics, and you'll find a bunch of them, or Golden Age, or Silver Age, and you'll find these panels. And my peeve that annoys me is that the people who say this is what they want frequently do not turn out to support them. I have to keep telling them, comic conventions do not program for empty seats. None of them do. We've got to have a turnout for these people. We've got to, and so we have now reached the stage where there's no Golden Age panel because there are no Golden Age creators left, really. A few that are alive are not going to come out to the convention. A couple of years ago at WonderCon, which is a pretty good sized convention, I was in the dealer's room and I ran into my friends Marv Wolfman and Len Wein. And I said to them, may I tell you gentlemen something horrifying? And they said, yeah, I guess so. I said, at this convention, there's 6,000 people. The 3 people who've been in comics the longest are us. There was nobody at that particular convention, who had been in comics before. I think Len was the first one in the business. We have since lost Len Wein, unfortunately. Marv is 70, I'm 69. We are now the old timers of the convention. There's no 80-year-old people there to really celebrate. But we had them for all those years. We interviewed them. We did panels with them. You came to Comic-Con 20 years ago, you had the chance to listen to guys. I did a panel, I don't remember how many years ago, with people who had worked on Action Comics #1, the first appearance of Superman. We had 3 people at that convention. They're all long gone, but we had a panel where I was sitting there talking to 3 people who worked on arguably the most important comic book ever published, and discussed what the business was like then and working with the people then. And we can't do those panels anymore. But there's important panels we can do with people who were in comics in the 60s and 70s and 80s. And we do them, and they're there. And if you don't find them, there's nothing I can do to help you out.
Absolutely. And I mean, like we've run the numbers before, and I mean, there are more panels at San Diego Comic-Con on comics than there are on TV, movies combined, like all of that. Like Aaron said, like you said, it's so frustrating when people make that argument because it's just not true. But if you're not willing to put in the tiniest bit of effort to find them.
I had a guy call me up one time, guy roughly my age into comics. And some people think I'm the complaint department for the convention. I don't work for the convention. They don't pay me a salary. I don't have a title there. I'm just a guy who's on a lot of panels. But this guy said to me how rotten he thought the convention was. And I said, what was wrong with it? He said, there's one more issue of Real Screen Comics, which is published, that I need to complete my collection, like a 1952 issue. And only one dealer there had it, and he wanted too much for it. That's the reason the convention was bad. Because no dealer, like the convention operators have a say in who brings what for sale and what they charge for it. But you have these little narrow windows here. People are seeing so many different things. What you've got going on at that convention is about 12, 15 different conventions. There's a Golden Age convention. There's a current comic convention. There's an anime convention. There's a cosplay convention. There's a science fiction convention. There's a convention for people who collect original artwork. There are individual conventions like these all over the country. There are original art conventions, and there are anime conventions and cosplay conventions. San Diego puts it all under one roof. And you need to find what you want to do. And I tell people, before the convention, look at the website, study it, make a list of the booths you want to visit. It's on there. Make a list of where you want to go. Also, mark down where the video game companies are and don't go anywhere near that part of the hall or you will be deaf.
I mean, honestly, like that's the entire reason that we even exist is because it like people don't understand like how much planning has to go into Comic-Con before you get to Comic-Con. Like we're a weird thing because we don't really cover necessarily like what happens at the convention like while it's happening. We cover everything like leading up to it because you have to do so much planning.
Well, you're very good. I've sent people to your site over and over again on my blog and in my real life, telling them, here's a place that learns people that know how to do Comic-Con. It's like it's pointless to go to Disneyland if you don't have either one of these great guidebooks that tells you how to do Disneyland or a friend who will take you by the hand and show you, here, now don't get in that line, get in this line. Here's where the restrooms are. You have to learn this stuff. The first time I went to Disneyland, I knew nothing and I had a miserable time. And the same way with Comic-Con, you need to do some planning and you need to get your hotel reservation. You got to figure out where you're going to sleep and where you're going to eat in advance. I make my dining reservations weeks before the convention. I pick out where I work into my schedule, and I go there, and I know what to bring. I know where to go. I know where to pick up my badge. I have my hotel room all locked down and set. I've got my transportation. I know where I'm going to eat. Being at the convention is not the time to figure that out.
No.
One of the dumbest things you can do at the convention is on Saturday night at 9 o'clock, turn to your friends and say, well, where are we going to eat? I don't know where you're going to eat, but it's going to be a long time before they serve you.
At that point, you're better off just picking up some street meat across the street from the convention center, some of those hot dogs they cook up on their little carts.
Yes, and then know where the hospital is. Yeah, I mean, you got to take a little effort to enjoy this thing so that your entire time at the convention is pure pleasure and it's not scrambling around for supplies you didn't buy. It's interesting. There's a Ralph's Market about 3 blocks from the convention. And in the evening, you can kind of go there and have the convention continue. Half the convention is there walking around and people are picking up supplies and things they wish they brought and medical supply, first aid things or hair care products or whatever. And I actually have gone to that market on Saturday evening sometimes and hung around for 2 hours talking to people in the aisles. I got a job once there. I ran into an editor there in the Ralph's Market, and he said, hey, you want to write this comic for us? It's a great little, mini convention thing. And then you party hop after that if you get invites to the parties, or you just wander the streets outside, which is like a big street fair. And it's a lot of fun. It's noisy, but a lot of things that are fun are noisy in this world.
We all miss that a lot.
The problem with doing your podcast is I'm missing the con.
I know.
More as I talk about it.
I know
how much fun it was to be there.
Wow.
And I have friends I see. There's a fellow named Bruce Guthrie who is at the convention every year. And if you search the internet, I'm sure you can find his site. This guy is obsessed with taking photos. He loves to take photos. Goes every place he goes, he takes photos, and he goes to a lot of events. I think he goes to lots of things like parties in Washington, D.C. He gets into these things, and he photographs all the celebrities there, and he goes to openings, and he comes to Comic-Con every year. And he comes to all my panels and takes lots of pictures. And I have discovered that if I am anywhere in the Comic-Con or adjacent to it, like at one of the restaurants within a block or two, I swear to you this happens. I can just have a moment where I run into somebody and I think to myself, gee, I wish Bruce was here with his camera. There he is. He pops up magically, like Mr. Mixiospitalik. He pops up when you suddenly you need him, and I have photos from the convention I can't believe I have because Bruce just happened to be there of all the places he could be around that city. And if you search for Bruce Guthrie on the web, you will probably find his website, and you can look up any year at Comic-Con and see a couple hundred photos of everybody who was there. They're beautiful pictures. He's a great photographer. I love just seeing Bruce every year. I always say all I have to do is just say I need a photo. He shows up.
Mark, who do you see as the next generation of somebody who's like you and somebody who you might, when you're done doing this and are ready to pass the torch, who's going to be our next Mark?
Who's gonna pry the torch out of my cold dead fingers?
Yes.
I don't. I'll be somebody. I mean, somebody else will host panels. Somebody else will be on your podcast. I mean,
are there any moderators or panel hosts that you particularly enjoy that you think do a really good job?
I don't really go to other people's panels. That's one of the problems. I'm doing.
Well, you don't have time.
I do 14 to 15 panels a year there, and if you add to that all the stuff I have to do, like business meetings and people want to interview me, like you'd be surprised that people want to interview me, and I don't really go to other people's panels. I poke my head in occasionally something, and I always hear good panels. People are trying to get a little sense of show business. Comic book conventions didn't have a sense of show business. The way panels were done at conventions in the 70s was somebody would say, we're going to have a writer's panel, we're going to have an artist panel. And they say to someone, put together an artist panel. And this guy would just grab 5 artists and go upstairs to the hall and do an artist panel without a lot of thought behind it. Because none of these conventions, these panels in the 70s were business oriented. They weren't the case of promoting product. They were just panels to be interesting. Now, unfortunately or fortunately, an awful lot of the panels there are infomercials. There are companies that hire someone to guide their presence at San Diego and to stage a bunch of panels and help them have their booth and to help them publicize themselves on bus signs and all these, where they wrap the hotels and pictures of movies that are coming out and such. And there's an industry there that's cropped up. There's even an industry of supplying what they call booth babes. You can rent models for your booth to attract people there. And the booth babes have agents. I don't understand that a lot, but it's part of the business. So there are people who are becoming professional panel runners at conventions. Actually, the best moderator I have seen at a convention in some time there is on TV now. It's Chris Hardwick, who hosts The Wall, the NBC game show, and who did At Midnight and something. I followed a panel of his. Did I tell the story about that? The Muppets? Did I ever tell that story?
I think so. I think it sounds familiar.
Yeah, well, I had to follow a panel with Cookie Monster. And he ran over, and the one person who you can't throw off the stage is Cookie Monster. But Chris Hardwick was the host of that, and he did a great job with it. But he's not I'm an amateur. He's a professional. He was a professional when he was hosting the panels. And if that's the future of Comic-Con, fine. He did a great job. I do it just because it's fun for me. And it is the extent of my show business career. When I was started as a comedy writer, I would hang around the Comedy Store writing for some of the guys there. And there was an assumption that everybody at the Comedy Store who wasn't a customer had an act. And people would just turn to me, and without saying, are you a stand-up comedian? They'd say, oh, so where have you been playing lately? And I say, well, at home. I played a movie last night. And he said, no, where do you do stand-up? I go, I don't have a stand-up act. I could never conceive of myself standing on a stage with a microphone, telling jokes and things like that. But I can do this, and I can host a panel. That's the extent of it. So it's fun to do that occasionally. And I feel like I'm making a contribution because there are people sitting there enjoying the panel. And I don't think there's going to be that many of that in the future, because I think most of the panels, if I didn't do some of these panels on comic history, those rooms would be hosting, a publisher showing off his new line. I do the very few there's very few panels at Comic-Con, unfortunately, these days, or any conventions I've been to, where someone isn't asking you to buy something. The cartoon voice actors have become real superstars at conventions. In most cases, they're there because a show they're on has paid them to come down and promote the show. So they're there to promote the show, and that's nothing wrong with that. But I just say, let's get two guys together and put the spotlight on you, not try to get people to watch your show. It's a little different. So,
well, I hope that you're a little bit wrong in that that's the wave of the future, because I think we need more moderators and panels like yours and less like infomercials.
well, Aaron, one thing you can always count on in this world is that I will always be at least a little bit wrong. I might be a lot wrong, but so the conventions have gotten more commercialized. I mean, I can't tell you how different they are from what I went to in the 70s, how even in San Diego. And it's a natural evolution. If I don't believe in running around saying stop, progress, stop the world. I think as the world evolves, you need to embrace it. The guys who are older than me, who I really admire, are the ones who learned how to use the internet, and learned how to use cell phones, and learned how to set their TiVos or their VCRs, and who just embraced the fact the world is changing and didn't keep saying, why can't it be like it was when I was younger? Because nothing is, including you. So, there are conventions smaller. There's this thing called the San Diego Comic Fest that they do in spring every year, which is kind of intended to be, somebody is calling me on my, spam risk. I'm not going to answer the phone for spam risk. Anyway, I'm starting to say the idea of the San Diego Comic Fest was to kind of replicate a little bit what San Diego Con was like in the 70s. Now, you can't do that much of it because you can't sit with Jack Kirby by the pool. We don't have Harvey Kurtzman there. We don't have June Foray. We don't have Ray Bradbury. This just, the world has changed. And also, the comic book business at that time was the comic book business. The comic book business now is the movie business. The top comic book publishers are movie companies first, and comic book publishers not even second or third. Maybe it's an adjunct. It's a way they develop the properties they'll sell as movies in the future. And that's something I can't do anything about. So you learn to live with it. You learn to adjust to it. I hate sounding like an old timer because I don't like to think of myself as one. But I am stunned every week by how much my world has changed. Every week, something, just in terms of technology. Last night at midnight, I finished a script for something, pushed 2 buttons, and it was delivered to the people who I had to deliver it to. I couldn't do that 30 years ago. I had to print it out on paper and put it in envelopes and take it to the post office the next day, and they'd get it 3 days later. We do that stuff like that all the time. And the price for that is that we lose some of the innocence. We lose some of the fun. It used to be fun when I was younger, driving the scripts out to the airport. There was this, out by LAX here, there was a post office where if you brought stuff you wanted to send to New York, you got it there by 10 p.m., you could mail it to New York and it would be delivered, this is express mail, the next day. So I would drive out to, the LAX, I'd leave here I headed down to a science. If I left here at 9:27, I could get there by 9:55. And then I couldn't find a parking space. So 9:58, I would run in and go, here I am. And the same lady every time would go, you can't cut it this close. Or okay, but you can't cut it this close. And then I look around and see 5 other guys working for DC or Marvel who were there talking. They go, oh, hey, let's go out and get a bite now that we finished our scripts for artwork. And we'd all adjourn to some place to eat food. Okay, that was fun in its own way, but we don't do that anymore. We stopped doing it when we got fax machines, and now we don't even use the fax machines. We use scanners and PDF files and WeTransfer or Dropbox or whatever however we do it. And embracing that is wonderful. And the comic conventions have changed the same way. They're not the same way they used to be. Even the little ones are covering an industry that has changed completely. And this is not a negative thing. I'm accepting the changes. I think they're mostly for the better, and I accept the perks that come with them, and regret the little. I'm just as happy not driving out to the airport at 9:57. It's fine.
So I don't know if you have seen it on some social media, but this is going back to mentioning Kirby. Did you happen to see that the Kirby Crackle has made its way into Disney California Adventure?
No, I didn't.
They've actually lined some of the walkways with the Kirby Crackle around the Guardians of the Galaxy ride and where the Avengers campus is opening.
You know, I live in a world where I see Jack all the time. I mean, my house has Jack Kirby all over it, different ways of drawings, things on the wall and such, and books of his. And if you look back, the shelf down there is full of Jack Kirby reprint books. And I think up there's a few other ones. There's the Pogo books right there that I work on. And this back here, there's Jack Kirby magazines and such. But when I'm at the comic convention, I look around and I see Jack characters Jack designed, or artist Jack influence, or styles where people have picked up, maybe not directly from Jack, maybe from someone who was influenced by him, but they've picked up ways of drawing and ways of trying to force perspective or whatever he did. And then I walk around the toy store occasionally, and there's Jack Kirby everywhere. And why shouldn't I walk around Disney California Adventures and see Kirby Crackle? He's everywhere. He's amazing as influence. For those who don't know, Kirby Crackle refers to the way Jack drew a kind of outer space scene, a certain kind of energy that did not exist in reality, but it could usually be found around the Silver Surfer. It's an interesting, it's a shorthand for comics that he invented that many people have picked up. Yeah, I mean, there's Kirby in Disneyland now. Kirby is in the Disney World. Kirby there was an exhibit of replicating his drawing table for a while at Disney World. I don't know if it's still there. I am just, I met that man in July of 1969, and I'm still learning about him, and I'm still talking about him, and I did not at the time even begin to realize what kind of an effect he would have, not just on my life, but on so many people around me.
Well, Mark, I want to say thank you so much for joining us today. This has been, as always, an incredible talk.
Well, let me ask you, are you all going to go to the thing in Thanksgiving? They do it?
Most likely.
I am fairly certain I am, but I want to make sure it's actually happening before I book a plane ticket. Yeah.
Okay.
I won't be flying out for that. I'm waiting until next July.
Well, I have the luxury. I drive down to it.
Yeah.
And I've learned, and I've learned how to do that. I've learned where the restaurants are on the way there and back, things like that. I have taken the position during the pandemic, very stubbornly over and over again, that I do not believe anybody's predictions of when things will open up. I think I say, we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, but we still have no idea how long the tunnel is. And so many bad predictions that I just don't trust any of them. I like to think that by Thanksgiving, we will be feel safe enough to go to this event. I'd like to think they can pull it together. I know if it's any way humanly possible to do it, these people can do it. But the convention center right now is full of parentless immigrants who have crossed the border and nobody knows what to do with them. And I think there's still some homeless people camped out in there. They put in cots and showers.
Mhm.
Homeless people. I'd ask them, can you leave me a cot and a shower so I could just live at the convention center for the next convention? And they don't seem to like this idea at all.
It is going to be strange. Like, I'm with you. I have real hope for November, but that real hope does not extend to me buying a plane ticket until we're a little bit closer. uh,
Well, that's good. I didn't mean to interrupt your sign off here.
no, you're totally fine.
Getting rid of me. But I love what you folks do. I send people to your site all the time. I love the enthusiasm behind it. I love the fact that you take people by the hand and teach them what they need to know about the conventions. And I also love the fact that every so often I can go to your site and see a new Funko design of a character, and I have no idea who it's supposed to be. I look at it and I go, well, that's like, that could be George Washington. It could be, Della Reese. It could be, I don't know. I don't know who any of them are. It could be James Riley, for all I know sometimes. It could be anybody, and it's a good guessing game. I posted the picture of the one they did for John Oliver on my website and asked people to guess who it was, and nobody got it.
That's amazing, actually. That's really funny.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for having me in. I'll be back next year if you ask me.
Yes, we will definitely ask you, Mark.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you. Take me off the screen now. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thank
See you later.
you.
Bye, Mark. All right. Well, there goes Mark. As always, I mean, I feel like we could just have him on to talk for like 2 hours straight.
Yeah. He's really like the best of Comic-Con, what Comic-Con has to offer and what it stands for and how it started and what it can still be. And just, he's a good guy.
He is a good guy. He's an awesome guy. All right. Well, let's talk about Comic-Con at home, which we are doing again in 2021 I'm not looking at a calendar, but I believe it's like July 23rd through the 25th.
Yes.
Okay.
That is correct.
Woo. We are not on the ball this year, guys. But first up, I just want to reiterate again that one of the most important things about these online conventions is how insanely important it is for you all to support artists and small vendors, because again, the movie studios will pretty much be fine. The TV studios will pretty much be fine. The people who will not be fine are the people who make most of their money by selling art prints at a small table at these conventions when we have not had these conventions in a year and a bit. So please support small artists. It's incredibly important, and you get to buy cool stuff. Like, who doesn't want that? We have just, you can go on and shop the virtual floor. We created last year a list of every single artist, small press, exhibitor, and fan table, and also where you can find them on social, their website, their web store, etc. So we will post a link to that in the show notes, and I think it might still be on the front of our homepage. I need to go look at that.
I think it is.
I think it is too. But please support small artists.
And if art is your thing and you're looking for some good original art, Andy is still doing the commissions post. He's created a list of artists who have open commission lists with examples of their works, how to get a hold of them, and it's a super, super great resource. It's a great way to find new people, get some new fancy artwork.
It absolutely is. So in talking about artists, let's start off by talking about exclusives, by talking about Patrick Ballesteros, who is, or at least was, apparently watching tonight. I don't know if you guys saw him comment in the chat, but I did. But his first exclusive is Super Smashers. Do you have a slide? There we go. which is one of his 25 cent wonders, which are these adorable little kidified pop culture characters, and it looks like they're riding those rides that we used to have outside of grocery stores for kids. This one has basically all the Falcon and Winter Soldier characters. It's 9x12. The price and the exact release date will both be announced, or no, I'm sorry, it's $20. But the date that it will be released will be announced closer to Comic-Con at home. But Patrick, as always, has plenty of other things up his sleeves, so he will have more things to announce soon enough.
And we've also had some announcements from Diamond Select.
Too many things.
Toys, 20 something, I think is what the total was. Now, normally what Diamond does is they sell these to retailers who then pick them up at the convention, take them back to their booth, and you can find them at a whole bunch of different booths. This year, since obviously Comic-Con's not happening, if you're wanting any of these Diamond exclusives, your best bet is to check out your favorite online retailer, or you can also check out your local comic book store. All of these are available to order from Diamond's customers, the comic book stores that order from Diamond Comics, and we can order them for you. I say we because I'm a comic book retailer, so I encourage you to check out.
The blog will not be ordering.
Yes, not we as in your comic book stores. And if you don't know your local comic book store, you can always check out comicshoplocator.com, which can put you in touch with one. But there's a huge variety of stuff. There's that clear translucent Mandalorian bust. There's a Nightmare Before Christmas mini-mate set. There's a Cobra Kai action figure set. There's quite a few Mondo things, including a tiki mug and some Godzilla and King Kong Mondoids. There's a pretty cool Crow action figure. The only thing I didn't see on their list this year were any comic books. Usually they have variant cover comic books. I don't know if they're just not going to do those this year, or maybe wait, but there's a lot of cool stuff.
There is a lot of cool stuff.
I don't know, did you guys have any favorites of that stuff, or anything you were wanting to pick up? Or the Muppet set was the Muppet
set. The Muppet set honestly was probably my favorite.
Yeah, it's pretty cute. Especially coming off the heels of the Muppets Now episodes that always had Bunsen and Beaker and doing their science lab stuff. So
yes,
I like the Mecha Spider-Man. That looked pretty cool.
Yeah, that Mecha Spider-Man.
That was Mondo.
Yep. Not cheap stuff, that's for sure. There were some pretty expensive items on that. I think the Mecha Spider-Man is 170.
He's 170. I mean, there are some reasonably priced.
Yeah, there's definitely, yes. I think the most expensive was that Mandalorian.
Yeah, I think that was like
bust, but it lights up, right? Is that and it's a 1 to 2. It's like a half size head. It's not a full head. It's like a 1 to 2, right? So 10-inch bust.
Yes. So some very cool things there. I do actually think that we will be getting more exclusives when we get closer. I'm actually almost a little bit surprised that they announced this early, even though in my head I'm like, well, it's late May, like at a normal year.
Yeah.
It's gonna be early. It feels early for a virtual convention. But I'm fully expecting us to get like Funko, and Entertainment Earth did a bunch of stuff last year. I think they'll do it again.
Probably.
Yeah. Well, I'm not so sure about Hallmark. We'll see. Again, with a virtual convention, like it's all very curious to see like what people do.
That's. How do you think that the potential for the November event plays into everybody's exclusive plans? I mean, will they just be like, well, we won't do anything for the virtual one, we'll just wait and do it in November? I'm wondering what they're thinking. Yeah, James is giving
honestly,
something like this, probably.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure. Honestly, I'm sure they would love to have more information to know what they need to do as well on their end. But I mean, even though it is virtual, San Diego Comic-Con is still the biggest convention. Like, we will still see stuff. But yeah, it's just all very curious what happens. I mean, even just a couple months ago with WonderCon, like Funko had exclusives, but they were like, well, we had delays, so we'll put them up on sale like a month later. Sorry. So things can happen. We'll see what happens with this. But yeah, we should be seeing some more exclusives as we get closer to Comic-Con at home.
Yeah. And speaking of the we know the news is out there, but there is Comic-Con Special Edition coming to San Diego in November, the weekend right after Thanksgiving.
Yep.
That is the date and location. Whether it actually happens, we still don't know for sure, as we talked about, but we will be reporting on that and covering it if and when it happens.
Yeah, I mean, we've had so many questions about this, and as I keep telling people, I mean, we truly know nothing about this event beyond date and location. Like, we don't know attendance size. We don't know if out-of-state people are going to be allowed, though I assume they will be as California opens up more. We don't know what the event is intended to be. Like, I know James and I are not expecting much Hollywood presence. Like, I'm very much expecting this to be like even WonderCon light as opposed to SDCC light. But we'll see what it is. I am excited. I really am. Like, yeah. I want to see you guys. I want to get out and talk to our vendor friends and our artist friends. I want to be back around people so long as it's safe to do so. But I also don't want to buy a plane ticket till we know.
Exactly. So we had a couple of reader questions. First one from Sir Lister Smeg asked, assuming Comic-Con 2022 happens, do you think Comic-Con International will go out of their way to make it a big one? And I mean, I think they're going to do what they can to make it as normal as possible, and give everyone who would bring guests and things to promote as easy to accomplish stage as possible to make it basically be back to what it was. So I don't know if Comic-Con's going to be able to make it. Basically, the people have to show up to make it. Because again, like what Mark said, Comic-Con is all these different things all in one, and all those different people have to show up to make it what it is.
Yep.
And I don't know, can they even, I guess, I'm not sure what Sir Lister means by to make it a big one, because I mean, physically they can't make it any bigger. They can't cram any more people into it. But
though they would if they could.
They would if they could. If the that darn fire marshal.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I think it's all just gonna take time. Like, I think we will, quite frankly, all be so freaking excited to be back at San Diego Comic-Con 2022, fingers crossed, that quite frankly, even if any other year we would be like, this is a terrible Comic-Con, there's nothing here, we're all gonna be like, oh my god, this is the greatest Comic-Con ever.
No, our barometers are gonna be so low.
The bar is set, the bar to cross is very low.
Yeah. They could ship our badges out in an unmarked envelope and not in the fancy box with a pin, and we'd all be like, yeah, I'm still going.
Yeah, pretty much.
Now, I don't expect them to do that.
I don't either. But like James was saying, I don't know that like full Hollywood is going to be pumped to go to San Diego Comic-Con by 2022. I feel like if the last year and a half has taught us anything, it's that looking far ahead into the future is a fool's errand. Yeah. So we'll just have to.
But also think about how quickly things have changed just in the past 3 months, or how much it's changed. You know, we were in such a state of inertia for a very, very long time, and like I feel like since March things have like really ramped up since the vaccines started. So you know, maybe it'll keep going, and we'll get to next year and everything will be just hunky-dory, and I sure hope so.
I hope so too. I think we all do.
It's kind of the same question from Xavier about do you believe once we go back to normal that movie and show companies will fight for space at Comic-Con to promote what has been lost for the past 2 years? And I think it's just once, because in order to promote, they have to have the people there, and it's up to the comfort level of the people showing up as to whether they will or not. So I think the companies obviously will want to, because they obviously will want to sell, their
Yes.
product to you.
Yes.
It's just in what form that takes to start. Whether it's just, hey, let's bring out one or two people that are comfortable and, have them show something really, like, again, the early footage or something, because that's something that's really big at Comic-Con. That doesn't require anyone to be uncomfortable to show something on the screen. So we may get a lot of that to start, and a lot of, special footage, compilations, sizzle reels, things like that may be the initial big thing that comes back to cons. And then the people will come as more and more people are comfortable.
Yeah.
But and hopefully they'll have things to show. Hopefully, like Hollywood and TV and movies get back to work at the same level as they were before. I know that things are happening, but hopefully there'll be our list of potential movies and TV shows that might show up there. Hopefully it's going to be a half a mile long with what could possibly show up there.
So, we've been talking about movies and TV, but there's two people in the comments actually saying, Karen Session said, I don't need Hollywood to have a great Comic-Con. And Sir Lister's Meg said, assuming SDCC 2022 happens, do you think publishers and other creators will go all out? And those are definitely that's a very different question, I think, than will the movies and TV shows show up. And I think for a lot of the smaller things like artists, small vendors, publishers, etc., I think it's all just going to come down to personal comfort level on a lot of that, especially as we first start heading back. So I think that will probably be more of like a case by case basis as opposed to like industry wide would be my guess. But
it may also depend on supply chain distribution and things like that too. If someone's printing up a lot of enamel pins, or if a company is working in the vinyl field, as long as those supply chains stay open and they can get those exclusives and they can get those, hopefully there's not some sort of, I know there's a wood shortage right now. I don't know if that's going to eventually trickle down to a paper shortage, but prints and other things that vendors can sell, as long as that stuff's readily available, hopefully we'll see it.
Yeah. And the things that we get as exclusives, I think are going to depend on the company and their resources and the lead time needed to produce things, because we're not going to be able to guess if something takes 6 months to produce and get to Comic-Con like a lot of the Hasbro items probably do. We may not get a lot of things like that we normally would in the past, because they don't know how many people are going to be allowed to show up to produce that number 4.
Yep.
So we may be getting lots of easy to do things like T-shirts and buttons and pins and all those kinds of things that are probably
mass. Yeah.
a lot shorter lead time. So, and then Patrick Balestros actually had a comment. SDCC Lite, I feel, is going to be the testing ground for the con and for some studios, setting up protocols for guests and panels. I'm curious how they will space out in Artist Alley. That's, all of that. I mean, it's going to be, if November happens, it's really going to be interesting to see what restrictions they have, how they go about it, and how that's going to transfer to Comic-Con in July, depending on, again, what further restrictions or less restrictions or anything else. So it's definitely going to be, let's see what happens. There's only so much conjecture we can have as to what's coming in November. But there's things we would like to see happen and what we hope would happen. But I think right now we just basically want a convention to happen and to have the chance to be able to walk around, see artists, comics, promotions for whatever TV and movies just happen to show up, and just enjoy being back at a convention.
Absolutely. Well, and the good news too is that July is a very long way away. So fingers crossed for November. But if that happens, Comic-Con will then have November and then WonderCon both to sort of test things out prior to San Diego, as well as viewing what like every other big convention is doing. So I feel like hopefully by next July, like things will be running fairly smoothly. But yeah, I mean, we're also incredibly curious to see how all of this is going to play out. I think everyone is, but we don't have the answers. And honestly, I think if you ask Comic-Con International Day, they would be like, we don't have the answers yet either. So.
But we're all going to find out together.
Yep.
Yep. Okay, I think that wraps up the the beginning of the season. Wow.
Yeah.
The 10th season.
Yes. So let's go ahead real quick, actually, and talk about the schedule for the rest of the season. So like James said at the start of this episode, because there's not as much news, we are doing monthly episodes as opposed to weekly. So our next regular podcast will actually be on June 22nd. And then, of course, we will have another one in July on...
I think it's the
July
15th, basically the week before Comic-Con.
Well, July 13th is the date. 13th, yes. And then that Saturday of Comic-Con at Home, which it should be July 24th at around noon, we will have our big show. I'm not going to promise that we're going to top last year's because I don't know that that's going to happen, but we're going to at least attempt to get you guys some good casts. And yeah, I mean, that's our regular season for this year. You can also find us doing monthly podcasts over on our Patreon, which the link to that is in the show notes, and it should be on the sidebar of our website. But the Patreon helps keep the lights on and pay our hosting for our site. So thank you so much to everyone who contributes to that. We make $0 doing this. Every dollar we make goes back into the site. So thank you again for that.
Well, thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate you all watching and listening. Erin, where can we find more of your work on the internet?
I can be found on Instagram and on Twitter at Bavarian Erin. Carrie, where can we find more of you on the internet?
You can find me on Twitter at Carrie Dixon. James, where can we find you on the internet?
I am everywhere on the internet at Dan Riegel, and you can check out geekshotphoto.com for all the social media and other links for my wife and I and our photography. And speaking of my wife, thank you, Beth, our producer, for editing this show, creating the slides, and all the other little things that get this podcast done.
We are on iTunes. If you'd like to subscribe, the links are up on the blog, or you can search for SDConCast. If you like what you've heard so far, please review us. We are also on Stitcher Radio. The link is in the show notes.
And if you want to get a hold of us, you can send us an email at sdcomiccon.blog@gmail.com. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/sdconblog, or tweet us at sd_comic_con. Thank you all for watching and listening, and everybody, go
Shawarma.